Call the meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda, 1.03, approval of the agenda for this evening. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you, Sarah, and a second from Christy, excuse me. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye, and no one's opposed or abstaining. What?
We have that third executive.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
I would like to ask for a third executive session.
So this is the one that's going to be at the end? Okay. And this is for the purpose of collective bargaining discussion? Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. So we will add item. Right, but I'm going to put it, and is it going after consent or is it going before? So this is the regular time? So then it'll be 10.01, right? So executive session at 10.01 for collective bargaining discussion. Motion? Thank you, Daryl. Sure, second it. Further discussion? All those in favor indicate aye. Aye, and no one's opposed or abstaining. Okay, now is there a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussion of the employment history of a particular person or individual, superintendent's evaluation? Thank you, Chrissy, and a second from Sarah. Any discussion? All those in favor indicate aye. Aye, and no one's opposed or abstaining. All right, so we'll go into exec and come out for our 6 o'clock meeting. Board meeting with item 3.01, presentation, building update from Wellwood Middle School. Is she Trish area?
Trish,
I'm looking around.
you're up.
Oh.
Yep.
Yes, sorry. We.
Thought I missed the first part. All right. Is everyone ready? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. It's an honor and privilege to be presenting. When we were asked to present a while ago, it was a little bit of a challenge at first to select from the many wonderful things that are really going on at Wellwood. But I thought back to one of the things I was most impressed on when I first interviewed for the position at Wellwood as an assistant principal, and it was the enrichment period. At the middle school level, I really feel it's a great time to expose our students to a wide range of opportunities. It can help spark or build an interest or hobby that they can establish new friends, learn new skills, and perhaps even determine a lifelong passion that they have that could even be related to a career later on. So tonight, I am very proud to be highlighting the diverse opportunities our enrichment period offers to our students at Wellwood. So our enrichment period is an extension to our school day. Our dismissal's at 2:40, and then from 2:50 to 3:30, Mondays through Thursdays, our students have the opportunity to stay after. They can stay after for either academic support or clubs and activities. And all of our students that stay after do have the opportunity for transportation is available to them. So if that is a need, they have that available to them as well. In regards to academic support, our students can stay for extra help to study, prepare for an upcoming assessment, work on projects, or make up missing work. This can be student or teacher initiated, and teachers and counselors often partner with families when needed to establish after-school schedules for our students. We also have sports study hall, so our student athletes who have practices or games, it offers a chunk of time where they could be working on their academics. So when they get home at 8, 9 o'clock at night, hopefully a chunk of that is already out of their way, which is a really important support for them. The second thing that we offer, or kids can stay for, is clubs and activities. And at Wellwood, currently this year, we have 40 clubs that are offered to students. 10 of those clubs this year are new. And the best part is a lot of those clubs are really student-driven. And I'm gonna talk about that. Here's the list of the clubs that we offer, or that are offered this year. They vary from year to year. I've underlined a few because I want to highlight some of them. I won't highlight them all, we'd be here forever. But one of the first one, announcements, I've highlighted in the video at the end tonight. You'll see what the announcements are. But I think, I know Melissa's here, I think it was 4 years ago that announcements started where we create slides and the students record them. And the club part is where we have student leaders who train other students how to record and do the announcements, and then they create a schedule and they work on that. So it's an incredible part. It's something that's a part of our everyday at Wellwood. Another one I wanted to highlight is our newspaper club, which started 3 years ago. This is a completely student-run, initiated newspaper. It's called the Wellwood Wednesday, and it's accessible on our Schoology page under the resource section. But that is facilitated by our 8th grade English teacher, Kendra Myers, and those articles, everything that's published in there is all student initiated and created. The last one, I don't think enrichment period would be possible without the school store. School store is so critical for enrichment period. Our students run the school store, so we have students that are responsible for managing, taking care of the money, counting the money, the stock, and all of those components of that, so that's run by students. And then, of course, we have many students who visit the school store for snacks to get them through till dinner time. The other ones that are underlined up there, Coding Club, Intramurals, Dungeons and Dragons, Pokemon Club, those are probably some of our most popular. You'll see a little video clip of Dungeons and Dragons. The kids are filtered out into the hallway. It got so big that we actually had to shift them to the LGI. And Mr. Arena, he's the teacher who facilitates it, 5th grade teacher, said his highest number so far for Dungeons and Dragons was 85 students this year. So it's quite popular. So I highlighted those. Those are some of our most popular right now, but again, it ebbs and flows based on student interest. I also italicized a couple of them. Science Olympiad, Robotics, and Math League. These are 3 clubs that involve competitions outside of the school day. This year, we extended Math League. We opened it typically was 7th and 8th. This year, we've extended to 6th grade too. And the last part that you'll see up there is the asterisk indicates the clubs that are new this year. So how do clubs get created? We have a club proposal process. It's a form that students can come pick up in the main office. They're responsible for creating a club proposal, a description of the club. They have to find a teacher that will supervise or facilitate. And then they're asked, once they've found that teacher, they identify when, how often they'll meet, and then they talk about any materials or equipment that will be needed. Once that's completed, they turn it into the main office. I set up a time to meet with them. And we sit down and we talk about the club. And what's most important is that we create a club that everyone can be a part of. So sometimes we have to talk about safety, because safety is sometimes, we had a Born to Dance, we were talking about some lots of flips and things, and so sometimes safety things, some of those logistical pieces we have to work through. And then the equipment piece, I'll give you an example. Last year, there was a club, cubing club, Rubik's Cube, which is a big thing. There are major competitions about cubing. I had no idea, but the students taught me all of this. So we talked about, well, I'll share mine, and I said, well, why don't we do a proposal to our Wellwood HSA? So sometimes we lean into our Wellwood HSA, but I ask the students to do the work. They do the legwork. So you go get me some, go find out how much they cost, put that together so we can put a proposal, so we do the request form and they do that work, the research behind it. And I'm very thankful, our Wellwood HSA has been a huge support. We've, this year, a couple of the clubs that they've supported, we have a new bird watching club, so they bought buying binoculars and guides. Chalk Club, those are just a couple more of the clubs that they've really supported with some of the materials, which has been tremendous to supporting the clubs that are happening. So the next part, I tell the students, once we go through the approval process is, all right, now how is everyone gonna know about your club? So they have the responsibility to create an advertisement and get the word out about what their club is and initiate that interest. So they create usually a slide. Sometimes we would put up posters throughout the building, but these slides will go into our morning announcements and you'll see a glimpse of that in the video. So then this is the last step in the process, and we determine what date, and then we get the information added into our Schoology resources about enrichment period. So then I paused and I said, wow, I'm thinking about enrichment period. I'm so excited about it, but maybe I need to tap into the students. So I went to lunch because I was like, I'm going down this alley. I'm so excited. I'm really excited. Enrichment period is what I'm going to present on. And I said, let me go talk to the students. And so the best time to talk to students is at lunch. You sit down with them, it's the best time to connect with them. And I just asked simply, why do you stay for enrichment period? Why should I go to enrichment period? And there's really a range of reasons that our students are staying for enrichment period. For some, it's about hanging out with friends, meeting new friends. For others, it's really important for them to get that extra help and that academic time. Some kids, one student was like, I don't want to be home alone. My parents work late, so when I stay after, I can be with people and I'm not home by myself. So there's a lot of different reasons. And then at one table, we ended up with a little debate about which one's the best. So there's some good debate about Dungeons and Dragons versus Coding Club, a little back and forth there, but a lot of different reasons why our students are staying after. So the participation and what we've really been focused on this year as a part of our student survey last spring is awareness of the clubs and making sure that students are aware of the opportunities that are available to them. So that's been our focus this year. All kids are welcome to participate. If there's a week you can't go, it doesn't mean you can't go to the club. If you have something come up, there's flexibility, and kids come and go. Sometimes they go to a club and they try it and they don't want to do it anymore, and that's okay. So we talk about those conversations, but we've really focused on the information and how do we get it out to our students, our families, and we've changed a couple things. Our schedule for clubs, we switched to a weekly schedule that gets posted in Schoology, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, for planning purposes for families. What days am I staying after and for what? So that's there. And the other reason is that they change, some are monthly, some are weekly, some are bi-weekly, so it helps with keeping track of when they're available. We highlight them in our announcements. That's a good time, that's utilized very often, which our students hear every morning. I've been trying to highlight some of these things in my monthly newsletter. And I know a couple weeks ago you heard from Ms. McChrystal about Agents of Change and that course. We have a student that has taken the initiative out of the student survey because they looked at that student survey to see what the perspectives of their peers were when they were determining something they wanted to focus their projects on. And one student is focusing on this piece, that there's a lack of communication and how do we build that awareness. So one of the things they're working on is videos to highlight the clubs that are offered, which will be shared in lunches and in our announcements. So I have a short clip. It doesn't highlight all 40, but this is a short clip just to highlight some of the clubs that are happening at Wellwood. And at the tail end of it, you'll get just a snippet of our announcements and what that's like.
Announcements. Today is Wednesday, December 6th. It is an odd day. Today for lunch we have turkey sub, warm corn and bean salsa, and fruit. Happy birthday to Sebastian and Mr. Fiacca. Here's some synonyms that you may recognize for the character strength of leadership. Inspirational, persuasive, encouraging, motivational, trailblazer, and organizer. Pops 12 meet today during lunch period. The second math league competition is today in room 212. The next school store meeting is Monday, December 11th. Join us in room 301 at 2:50 p.m. The next ski and board club is Tuesday, December 12th, 2:50 to 3:30 p.m. with grades 5 and 6 in the LGI and grades 7 and 8 in the auditorium. Please drop donations for the Wild Wardrobe in Mrs. Siegel's office. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
So you can see how we use the announcements as a great way to advertise what's happening in our building, not just our clubs and activities, but different initiatives that are happening. And I'm going to turn it over and ask if there's any questions. Oops, I just started the video again. That's not what I meant to do. Yeah.
Just a shout out to all of your teachers and the HSA for supporting this. This is great.
Thank you.
And what a variety for the kids to be part of.
Thank you.
Trish, I'm especially happy that you're working on leadership with our students. I think sometimes that as kids, we had more leadership opportunities than the kids do today, so good for you.
Thank you.
I was just wondering how the announcements get run. So there's slides and then it all happens in real time. All the screens are synced at the same time.
So we create the slides, give it to the students, they record them at night, they send them back to us. We post them in our calendar in Schoology. So our teachers go into there in the morning and they play them and during homeroom. Mm-hmm. He's great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. Next on the agenda, item 3.02, presentation from the district claims auditor.
it's up there. I think I've met everyone, but for whomever doesn't know me, my name is Leslie Malinowski, and I've served as the board's, the district's claims auditor since August of 2022. My financial background includes over 20 years with the business office of the federal court system. And my role here at the FM School District is to act as part of their internal controls team to ensure that dollars are spent efficiently. And I mostly accomplish this by reviewing invoices, requests, claims, all the payments that are submitted to the financial office. Typically, the claims are all charged out of 4 main accounts, those being the general fund, the school lunch fund, the special aid, and the capital funds. So there's a series of procedures that I follow when I come in once a week to do this task. And basically, I'm reviewing a packet of vouchers that are sitting there that the procurement and the financial staff has assembled together for payment. And I'm checking things like making sure that all the purchase order is intact with the receiving documentation, showing that the schools who ordered the items actually received them prior to paying these invoices. And also that the department heads have signed off, that the purchases themselves are appropriate and lawful. There's a whole bunch of things that I'm checking as I'm leafing through. And finally, I have to confirm that the payee and the check amounts are correct, and everything is copacetic in that before the checks go out the door. Usually I can detect any sort of anomaly or some sort of issue where it doesn't maybe look appropriate, something might be missing, a signature might be missing. In rare instances, if that happens, I just pull the payment and it's held until it can be corrected. So basically nothing's really leaving the door that's got blatant errors going on in there. So at the end of every month, I prepare a detailed report, which is similar to this, but it's got a little bit more detail. And that gets sent to the school board members, you folks, and the superintendent's office, and also to the financial supervisor. And this shows it's broken out into a total number of checks and invoice amounts for all of the invoices that were paid for that following week for the whole month. And then it gives grand totals. So this report here is something I also prepare. It's an interim report, and it only covers the 9-month period from February to October. And you can't really see that too well. It's down here at the bottom. And it's basically showing the same thing, but in a summarized view. And down here, it's showing any sort of issues that I detected that were corrected. And at the very bottom is the percentage of errors based on how much money and how many invoices were processed. So you can see that that's pretty low in all areas, in all months. It's always very, very low. Anyways, it turns out to be like less than 1%. And if you go back to the top, the total number that I audited was almost 3,900 for that period. And at a grand total of almost $47.5 million. So that less than 1% error margin is excellent. The financial staff is really crossing all their T's and dotting their I's and making sure everything is complying with the state mandated purchasing regulations. I've not really encountered any questionable purchases or repeated errors. Everything, by all accounts, the spending is in line with the budgeted amounts. So all the payments appear to be wholly appropriate, and the financial staff has been performing really efficiently. So unless anyone has any questions, that concludes my report. Any questions?
Does anyone have
Okay.
any questions, other than to say what a great job our business office is doing?
Just have one clarification.
Sure.
Because maybe I misunderstood it. The percentage of errors on the report, I
Right.
had always understood that to be the ratio of error claims to total claims, not dollar value.
Well, it's
Maybe just mention
yes,
that.
it's the total claims, the total number of claims for that week or that month, divided by
So it's not because
divided by the issues, right?
because if I look just at the March column, it's.
I may have
eight
misspoken. It's the number of claims that I've dealt with
Okay.
for each month divided by the total percentage of errors.
That's what I had
Total amount of
understood,
errors.
so
That's
thank you for
correct.
clarifying, okay.
You're right. I may have misspoken. But you're right.
Thanks so much, Leslie.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next on the agenda, item 3.03, President's Report. So on the 22nd, we will have a 5 o'clock start so that we can have a dinner to discuss some of the community relations matters. And that should be an abbreviated meeting with time for a retreat afterwards. Then we're going to have that special meeting on the 18th to finish up the superintendent's evaluation, and I will get information out to everyone prior to that meeting so that we could finish that on the 18th. And that's all I have. Any questions? Okay, then item 3.04, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you, President Mims. The backup information for 3.04 is in board docs. Under item 1, capital project update, the FM High School capital project continues with the contractors working with the onset of winter weather to try to get things all closed up for the tech edition. In addition, I will ask you to award the roofing bids for the high school construction project. The roofing award will be for the base bid as well as alternates number 2 and 3. In other news, we received word that our capital transfer project for Mott Road was approved for by State Ed for work to begin in the summer of 2024. So we're just finishing up some final loose ends there. Under item 2, OCM BOCES District Superintendent Visitation. Dr. Matthew Cook, the District Superintendent for OCM BOCES, would like to schedule a visit just to come out and meet our governance team during any one of the February or March Board of Education meetings. Since he was appointed just prior to the pandemic, Dr. Cook is making the rounds, introducing himself to each of the 23 component school districts. Item 3, congratulations to our fall interscholastic athletic teams. I'd like to express how proud I am of our fall interscholastic athletic teams for earning NISFA honors for scholar athletes, 13 teams, as well as a scholastic honor roll average of 94.08, with 6 teams earning 94% or better. Congratulations, FM Hornets. And last but not least, Dr. Robert Simmons III from Micron visited FM. And I just wanted to share that he was in attendance on December 1st. Dr. Simmons had a chance to tour a number of our buildings and to visit with both students and staff. He also had the chance to look at our new STEM technology addition currently under construction, as well as the school's library media center, which was completed as part of the recent 2017 capital improvement project. We thank Dr. Simmons for his continuing interest in coming to FM, and I'd also like to express my gratitude to Laurel Chiesa, our Director of Instructional Technology, and computer resource teachers Tim Thielen, Steve Carbone, and Amy Fiorito for organizing the visit and chaperoning the tour of the buildings. That ends my first report.
Questions for Dr. Tice on his first report?
Dr. Tice, for the Micron visit, was that initiated by us, or did they reach out and they're trying to tour a variety of school districts, or can you give a little context on how that transpired?
We reached out to them. We met ahead of time. Dr. Doughton was involved, and we reached out to them and expressed an interest. And I think they're trying to get to the other districts. There are some that obviously where the fabs are going to be located, and they've done a lot of work with those districts to the north, as well as OCC and Syracuse City. So I know Dr. Cook at BOCES is trying to ensure that all the other districts are part of the conversation as well. Does that help? Okay.
And Dr. Tice, I understand that Dr. Simmons is the head of social impact and STEM programs for Micron. Is that correct?
He's a consultant, he's a professor, but he shared with us that he turned them down a number of times to act as a consultant. But you're right, he's the one that's helping to work with them and be the interface for a lot of their educational initiatives. I think I shared, did I not, a hyperlink on a while ago on a Thursday letter.
Okay, Dr. Tice, second report on mental health services.
Thank you, President Mims. This is our last social, emotional, mental health report. It'll be rolled into the regular report at the beginning of the new year. Item 1, BIMAS 2, Mental Health Screener Administration. District officials are wrapping up the administration of the BIMAS 2 Mental Health Screener at the high school. As reported earlier, the administrations for the elementary and middle schools for the autumn are complete. School Climate and Culture Survey, I'm pleased to report that we concluded the student administration of the School Climate and Culture Survey to children in grades 5 through 12. Beginning in late December, a School Climate and Culture Survey will be administered to the faculty and staff. That'll continue on into early January. This will be followed by another student survey in the spring, as well as a family survey, too. Safety and security, I'm pleased to report that the Fayetteville-Manlius team, turnkey trainers, recently attended a school safety and security training in the Salem-Kaiser Cascade Threat Assessment Model. The team will roll out the training, including the Level 1 forms, to the administrative staff. Onondaga County will establish a Level 2 team, which school districts will refer their Level 1 assessments. And last but not least, the mental health supports brochure. I'm pleased to announce that the new FM mental health supports brochure will be hitting community mailboxes soon. The revised brochure will feature our new initiatives along with the multitude of services that are continuing in the year ahead. While the first edition was distributed in the autumn of 2022, this year's version is being distributed during December, where a number of individuals may be facing depression, often associated with the holidays and winter months. And I know the students were working on a presentation as well. So that ends my mental health report.
Are there any questions for Dr. Tice?
Dr. Tice, where did we end up landing with the county's supports with regards to some of the extra resources? And they were going to share some of the funding and all of that. Is that worked out?
I can look over at Ms. Evans, who's been working with them. I know the counseling clinical areas are in for review. I don't know if we've heard back on those. I was out of the district for a couple of days last week, and I know they're still in process, as I reported, I think 2 weeks ago, on the Promise Zone specialists, correct?
So Dr. Trice is correct. I met with the supervisor for the Promise Zone, I think about a week and a half ago. They are still looking for people, but we had some really great communication around some enhanced roles that they can play in the schools and things we hadn't thought of before. So it was a really good meeting, and they will keep us posted on applicants. So, thanks. Thank you.
Dr. Tice, I was just curious, with the mental health brochure, will there be a digital or a PDF version that will live somewhere on our website or go out via social media? Because I think a lot of people would catch it that way and be able to keep returning to that as well.
Great point. We did that last year, and we'll just update the information that's out there again. We put the mental health support, you remember, when Dr. Kilmer was here on Schoology, so that it would be at the fingertips for the students as well. So it may not be the exact PDF version because we have to do ADA compliance, but we'll get that same information pushed out as well. And this is, oops, I'm sorry.
No, Angela would like to ask a question. I have one after that.
Okay, thank you. This also gets pushed out like a newsletter, so it will not go just to parents, it'll go to all community members. So if there's a community member with a concern about a neighbor or something like that, they will have that information at their fingertips as well. good question.
And sorry, so just to clarify, it'll live on Schoology for students, and parents, but will it also live on our website somewhere? Because I think that would be.
Yeah, the other one was on the website as well, and I believe it's at the banner at the top, along with the DEI initiative.
Is there a reason why this is the last mental health report?
We had talked about the repetitive nature during my fall report, so the idea was to still do updates, but not to make it a separate item, to put it all in the main report, just so I don't sound department or redundancy department.
No, my concern, I think, was similar to Rebecca's. We were concerned a year or two ago that our students weren't getting the information. So if it's digital, that's probably the best approach. Some is on their ID, or am I mistaken?
On the back of the ID, there's some
Still
emergency
some.
numbers and so
Okay.
forth, but we will put this on Schoology, have it on the website. In fact, the brochure, as I shared during your Thursday letter, is a slight redesign with boldface, italic highlights of the new initiatives. Next year, we're looking to change the brochure and redesign it to try to just mix it up, so we put it in a little bit different format, so.
I recall it was a beautiful brochure initially, but we learned from our students that they never saw them. So that was our concern.
Good point, and that's why we're trying a different time of year too, not just to be, so people get it at the beginning of the year and, oh, this is a start of school, and they throw it away thinking it's a newsletter. We're trying a different time of year as well.
Okay, moving on to item 3.06, the committee representative updates. So audit met on the 28th. That was after our last meeting, right?
We did, and we had a very good meeting, and as you have heard, Leslie met with us first, and we asked her to come tonight. We'll have another meeting the end of January, but we haven't determined. Lynn Fry will be meeting, or has already met with our internal auditor and the administrators, and she will determine what he will study for this year. Let's see. Mr. Corbin presented the budget process to us and shared a 4-year trend analysis, which was very helpful. We're currently operating with a slight surplus, but we know that there are lots of things that are going to be needed, for instance, furniture and equipment. The other little item I wanted to mention to you is that there had been a request to eliminate the necessity of a clerk's report from our monthly meeting report, because first of all, it's redundant, but also is a great deal of manual work on the part of our business office that really doesn't serve a great purpose for us. So if it's okay with the rest of the board, the committee was in agreement about eliminating the need for that, so. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to community relations. Sarah?
So we talked a lot about updating the website. So it's been about 5 years since we've done a refresh, and the communications folks are going to be putting together sort of a proposal, a project plan for us to look at the next community relations meeting to streamline our content and clean up the stuff that's no longer valid and relatable on there. We also talked a lot about issuing statements with regard to current events and developing sort of protocols about that. The community survey were due at the end of last week. So I think we'll be taking a look at the response. We didn't have a very good response rate overall though. So we'll see how that turns out. And then we were discussing with regards to the website and issuing articles to help with the coming up budget vote, as well as some of the topics such as swimming pool that have been popular with community members that we want to highlight process questions and information so that we can make sure we're being as transparent as possible.
I looked over while you were reporting. I think I said at the meeting, we had like 150-ish responses. We ended up with 167, which is well down from the 600 plus we had last year.
Thank you. Next, facilities. Any report from facilities, Dan?
We haven't had another meeting. We have one on the 21st.
And policy met on the 8th, and we'll meet again on the 12th. DEI committee, I don't think we have an update right now. And same with the mental health task force. Okay. Then we will go to our student representative.
Okay, so not a lot of news since the past meeting. The sophomore class will be holding their Promise Movie Night this Saturday, and Dance Marathon has been kicking off well ever since the DMCs have been announced. They've already hosted a successful volleyball tournament, and there are fundraiser events all throughout the school foyer. Lastly, there has been talk about complaints about the library's policy to students' attendance, as in they shut the doors too soon before the library is full, and a lot of students after school and want to go to the library, but many are cut before they're allowed to. So that's just been a common complaint.
So there's like a cutoff as far as how many kids could be in there at once, you mean?
Yes, and some say I'm not always in the library, but sometimes the doors are shut before all the seats are even full, so a lot are cut out.
Thank you very much. All right, so we're moving on to item 4.01, public hearing on tax exemptions. So we need a motion to open the hearing. Thank you, Jason. A second from Daryl. Any discussion? All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. And no one's opposed or abstaining. Okay. So we'll begin the public hearing on tax exemptions. Dr. Tice?
Certainly, we've had presentations in the past. Legal counsel is here this evening. If the board members have any questions, was not in receipt of anything in advance for this meeting, so I think it's a matter of turning it over to the public if they're interested in coming forward.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk. I'm not quite sure what you are proposing. It seems to me you're offering a compensation for people, policemen, military people, et cetera. And some of the complaints from IC has been, if you give us an exemption, then it has to be made up, and it's going to be made up with the rest of the population, which I understand. But putting things in perspective, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but if you work for New York State and you're retired, your entire retirement income is tax exempt. That has to be made up. It has to be made up by me and other taxpayer. I have no problem with that. What I would have a problem with if would reject a proposal for giving exemption to policemen, et cetera, veterans, et cetera. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? Are there any questions from the board? Dr. Tice, did you have something you wanted to say?
The board is not, as you know, scheduled to take action this evening, so the question before the board is whether or not to schedule a vote in January. We have to make a decision by March 1st.
Well, I guess I would propose that oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask where the general public can get the information on what it is that you're discussing. We heard and found out that there was this meeting, but we didn't really know what the actual positions were or what you're totally proposing. Where can we get that information?
There's information when Mr. Corbin did it, presented to the board earlier in the process in early November.
Okay.
And information was not only in the minutes, but also on the website in an article, correct?
Okay, and the website is the Board of Education website?
The school district website,
The school
yes.
district website?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
But we can, if you want to call in to our district office, we can get that information out in a PDF to you as well.
Oh, okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
My business card in just a second.
Okay.
Just going to say as a clarification, when we do that, that the meeting itself with the presentation details is on the district's YouTube channel for that meeting date.
Thank you. I should have added that as well.
And I think it was February 13th, not no, when I went back, that was the one that the lawyers came and they presented the facts about the exemptions, I believe, was
The attorneys, but then Mr. Corbin gave us the magnitude of it
The last
earlier
time.
in November.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that was our initial conversation back then and having legal counsel present, but then Mr. Corbin, the board asked what would be the magnitude of the
Yeah.
impact, and so he presented in November.
just so people have an idea of all of the different intricacies involved in all of the different options.
Raise a good point. As you recall, when we were looking at it in February, we would have had to have made a decision on March 1st, 2023, and we decided to study it, work with the assessor's office to try to get the information we needed to understand the better magnitude in terms of the seniors and the veterans as compared to the first responders. So I think it was time well spent in terms of getting that information where we didn't have that, you're right, in February. Thank you.
Sarah, did you pull that date right out of your memory?
No, I looked it up earlier.
Anything further from the board?
No, I think it was about, I guess, just as long as we're talking about it, just the clarification on the date of the vote. So I think when we had talked at the last meeting, we had suggested that it be at the next, tonight was going to be the public comment, and then we were going to vote at the following meeting. So I was just wondering, are we still going down that path? Because I think that leads to a January 11th vote. Or is it going to be something different? I know we have until March 1st to act, but I just wanted the point of clarification.
It's up to the board. Did the board want to have a vote on the 11th, or does the board wish to?
January 8th, I'm
January
sorry.
8th, or does the board wish to have this? Is there any more information? Is there any other action the board would like to take?
So, I'm sorry, Dan. One question I have for the board is, you know, with some of these exemptions, we have a little bit of latitude to determine like income limits and percentages. So if we're going to put it up for a vote, we would need to decide what even we are putting up for a vote. right? Because it's not all just clear cut, yes or no to everything, right? You have to have a proposal put in place.
Yes, correct. And, I mean, Mr. Corbin was able to give us a ballpark figure for that. I think some of the income information that some board members had asked for is going to be a little bit tough to get. But yeah, we would be responsible for setting the limits and the thresholds, correct?
I think that if we're going to do that, and I think we do need to do that, because we haven't done it yet, if we're not voting at the January, I'm sorry, is it 8th or 11th, is the January 8th meeting, and we're voting instead at a later one after that, but before March, then, you know, obviously we would have liked a much higher turnout of people commenting on this tonight. It's a very important issue. What I would suggest or ask is that we hold the public hearing open for January 8th as well, and then hopefully we can have some additional communications out from the district about this is what is involved in, this is what we're looking at, since we're not voting yet anyway, if we're not voting on the 8th, to just hold it open, close that hearing and at the meeting on the 8th, and then proceed with voting.
As I watch the sidebar conversation between our district clerk and legal counsel, and a 30-day notice comes to mind. It's a great idea, by the way. I'm just finger counting the 30 days to give notice that if we're going to do a hearing. So it
Well,
may
I
not.
think we've done,
yeah.
I mean, I'll defer to council, obviously, but we've done the notice of the hearing. It's just not closing, it's just holding it open. But obviously council's here, I'll defer to them on that.
Sorry. Thank you. What I suggest would be procedurally better would be is we can close it, but then invite everybody to submit written questions and then hold another one on the 8th. So I think it would accomplish the same effect that you're looking for and give people a chance, if they're looking for more information, the district can provide that to them, and then they can submit questions to the board, and then we can have one more day of hearing. No, we're not too late to notice it for the 8th. Today, no, definitely not. No, because for this one, you only need 10 days. Unlike other ones, yeah, these are special that you only need 10 days. So we have plenty of time to notice it for the 8th. Yes. It wouldn't be a heavy lift, no, because there are a lot of districts that are contemplating all three of these exemptions right now, yes. All right.
Suggestion then that we proceed, so we would still have to do a motion to close this hearing and then just have the plan to renotice a further hearing of it on the 8th.
So on the 8th, we would be able to have individual votes on. So we're not going to be voting on the 8th then?
My caveat to that was if the consensus was to not vote on the 8th, to vote sometime between then and the March deadline.
Okay.
To reopen this on the 8th. If we're voting on the 8th, then no, we just proceed to vote on the 8th.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Or?
So who takes the action to actually write up a proposal of what we're voting on? What we would even be considering, whether we're going to answer questions about it or, what is it? Is that Colleen?
Are you asking like what we have to approve, like senior tax exemption, and then like would it be like based on, like could we say like, okay, senior tax exemption for people whose income is over X, or is that what you're asking?
Right, like, so we could allow people to ask actual questions about what we're proposing or not, or considering, otherwise it's a little more vague.
Yeah, we could work with legal counsel to come up with recommendations.
So I do just have one question, Colleen, that maybe you can answer that. This, Catherine, I'm so sorry. I'm having one of those days. I apologize. They came up and we'd gotten some written comments earlier today that I know we have a variety of elections that we could make on the veterans exemption.
Yes.
What we received today, I was not aware of was, and I don't know if it's accurate, so that's my question, is whether we have latitude on the income exemption for the other,
For the seniors?
for the senior citizen exemption.
Yeah, so every single exemption that you are considering, there is discretion within the board. With respect to the seniors, the law says that you can set a maximum of up to $50,000 income, and it can be anywhere between $3,000 and $50,000. That's the board's decision. And then it's a sliding scale. So let's say we picked $50,000. If you make $50,000 or less, then 50% of your taxes would be exempt. And then it slides down, and I think it's like $900 is the first increment. It goes down by 5%, and it goes down 5% all the way to, and I think the last one is like $58,900 would be 0%. But you can start it at $37,000. You could start at whatever number. The statute helps you develop the sliding scale.
So that's on the senior citizens.
That's on the senior citizens.
I didn't think that there was any income exemption on the volunteer firefighter
So
one.
the volunteer firefighters does not have an income exemption, but what the volunteer firefighters, it's first responders, so it's firefighters and ambulance workers. And that says for, if you're 2 years or more, then you can have up to 10%. So that's where you have the discretion there. And then if you're 20 years, the lifetime exemption, then that is a straight 10%. So your discretion with the first responders would be that 2 years service to just under 20 years service.
But no income component.
That's not an income, that does not have an income component, no.
So we haven't had thank you. So
You're
we
welcome.
haven't had this actual discussion about to Sarah's point, what we would actually be even voting on these. We got, Brad gave us his projections based on a certain income limitation on the senior citizen one. We haven't talked about alternatives on the first responder one, and there obviously are alternatives on the veteran. So I think we have to have a discussion unfortunately, on each of those of what are the variables and where would we land on what we're actually voting on before we even get to that. But we certainly, I would think, should have at least some consensus on what those pieces are that the public is made aware of, which again comes back to why I think we should have a further public hearing on the 8th on that.
So as much of that information as we can get out to the public ahead of the meeting would be helpful, and then having that board discussion on the 8th, but I don't know if even that would be enough time for us to have that discussion on the 8th. We may want to not commit to voting on the 8th, but to making sure that we have that discussion so that we're fully versed in what all these exemptions could be, and that the public is aware of all of the different options that we have. So.
Yeah, I'll say it a little bit differently. I think we should commit to not voting on the 8th, but I think before the 8th, we should commit to what is it that we would be putting forth, not here's all the options, don't know what you're going to be voting on, but commit to what it is we would be voting on, have a further hearing on that on the 8th, and then vote on some date after the 8th.
Well, I think we have to discuss all the options so we can figure out which ones we want. Okay.
Can these exemptions be revisited every year so that levels can be tweaked, or, I guess that's a question, sorry.
Yeah, so what the law says is that you can put this into place, and like by way of example, the veterans exemption, you actually would have to enact like the base, what's currently in the statute, and then you can adjust it. But any of these you can change whenever you want to change them. So what you need to recognize is the trigger date is March 1st. So they have to be in place by March 1st, and then it's what's in place at March 1st for that coming tax year, and then we could change it for the following tax year if we wanted to. Yes. So I don't have all of those memorized because there's lots. But there's 3 different levels and I think it goes 10%, 15%, and then the last one is based on, and that's somebody who's going to be injured, and that has a specific formula. And then you can adjust either up or down with those, and somebody can get both the first and the second level, which you need to recognize, so it could be higher. And then the statute actually has the different levels to go downwards or the different levels to go upwards with the percentages for the veterans. Yeah, you're welcome.
So can I just ask you?
Yeah.
You've been working with a lot of other school districts, you said, on this.
Yeah.
How have they come forward, discussed or decided upon what they're actually going to vote on and decide? Has it been?
It's all over the map. So I was talking with Dr. Tice earlier, and I have an area district who did a Citizens Actions Committee where we met with citizens 3 times. And then I have other districts that just have their business official, majority I would say have their business official do the financial impact, and then recommend to the boards. A lot of them try to be consistent. So in certain counties for the senior citizens exemption, they're staying lower. And I think it is in part because of the cost of living, where other counties are going a little bit higher. So school districts have been trying to be consistent with their county or with their neighbors, but they can't always do that because not everybody acts in concert. So it's really, everybody has their own approach. There's no consistency with that. The only consistent thing is everybody is talking about these exemptions. So, but that's it.
Anything further? All right, is there a motion to close the hearing? Dan, second from Jason. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye, and no one's opposed or abstaining. All right, now we'll move to item 4.02, which is our regular public comment. Understand we have Mr. White.
Okay, so I've been coming for 2 years now, presenting on the grading policy. Last month I was inquiring about if anything had happened in the year I hadn't been here. I talked to Dr. Tice last week about this to follow up, and I was informed that there wasn't much activity done by the faculty in terms of a committee to look at grading policy. So, my thought on this, I'm a licensed clinical social worker for 25 years. I currently run a program for Rutgers University for the past 12 years, including currently training a sizable number of school psychologists through a large school district in New Jersey, 750 hours of training that I'm providing for them over the course of a year around mental health and working with students and their families. This is my career, it's my expertise. This is literally the lowest of the low-hanging fruit. We talk a lot about mental health and mental health working with students, and I can assure you that, work from the bottom. Take the easy things, such as, get rid of grading policy that overly is punitive and punishes students for the smallest infractions, such as a late submission to get a 0 on a grade for a late submission or a formatting mistake, or to get a 50% grade or something like that. These are the easiest things you can go after in terms of addressing mental health issues of your students. Very easy to be done. Now, hearing that Dr. Tice said that there wasn't any movement that was done on the faculty edge, kind of doing from the top down. I'm certainly providing the bottom up here. We're at 250 students, I believe, who've signed this petition, and I'm still coming every month with 1 petition a month. I'm bringing. I'm going to be here for several more months. How about this? Why not, and this is something I discussed last week with Dr. Tice, why not Dr. Tice submit a statement out to blast out to all the faculty saying, we're considering banning the policy of giving 0% grades and 50% grades to students. If you're against this change, please step forward and state your reason why. Make them defend it. Okay, make your faculty defend this thing. I think it's indefensible. I think really you're going to find that it's just a matter of cruelty that's why this happens. So I'm saying let's put it on foot. Let's make them defend the fact that they think this is a policy worth keeping, these type of grading practices, because I think they're indefensible. Thank you.
Sarah, was there anyone else who registered for public comment?
There was not.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5.01. We have an unusual executive session that we're going to take now. Should be a very quick executive session. Afterwards, we will come back out and continue the rest of the meeting. Is there a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing the employment history of a particular individual? Thank you, Cindy, and a second from Dan. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye, and no one's opposed or abstaining. So hopefully this will be about 15 minutes. Hopefully. Okay, we'll continue the meeting. Item 6.01, approval of the minutes from the November 27th, 2023 regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Cindy. Second from Daryl. Any discussion? All those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? One abstention from Dan. Next, item 6.02, approval of agreement. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District approves of an agreement and general release with an employee and authorizes the superintendent of schools to take the necessary steps to implement the agreement? Is there a motion? Thank you, Rebecca, and a second from Sarah. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye, and no one's opposed or abstaining. Moving on to 6.03, NYSBA policy transition. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District hereby moves the 2000 series policies into second reading? Is there a motion? Thank you, Cindy, and a second from Chrissy. Any discussion?
My only question on this at this point is the best practices guide. Because when that came up, however many years ago now, I know we had a very, very lengthy discussion about that was not policy. It's just a guide. It still says that in the preamble of it, which is right. But it was never previously an exhibit to policy 1000 because it was not policy. We agreed it was not policy. In this with what we've been proposed with here, it's identified as policy 2000 exhibit. So it's not policy, so it shouldn't be an exhibit to policy. It's just a standalone reference guide of best practices. There's a kind of an important distinction there between if it's an exhibit to a policy, it's part of that policy. But we had agreed before that this was not actual policy.
So I know we talked about it as sort of like an administrative regulation for the board. And when we were cleaning up the former policy 1000, there was a lot of duplicate wording and items that were overlapped with the best practices document. And so I think that was in part why it was referenced as a sort of more of like an administrative regulation for the board, was the intention.
Or doesn't draft or prepare administrative regulations. That's not a board function. So I'm just going back, we've had this discussion before about, when we do things and decide on things that we try not to revisit things. We had this discussion of whether it belonged as part of the policy or not part of the policy. And the last time we talked about it, was very clearly agreed that it was not part of policy. It is what it states it is. It's a best practice guide. But making it an exhibit, a formal exhibit to a policy, literally brings it into that policy. So
Can it
it's,
stand alone?
I would say no differently than it does today. So in board docs, under featured, there's a link for best practices for board operations. That's where it lives today. That's at least where I believe it should continue to live.
Is that where it's located right now?
That's where it's located right now, yeah.
Okay, why don't we just leave it there and keep it as a best practice? That's easy enough to do. We'll just remove it as a Exhibit F, a Policy 2000 Exhibit F, and it's going to be just a standalone exhibit in where it's currently housed. Okay, we're good? All right, great, thank you. Sorry.
Just one other piece on that, and which may or may not change our mind on it, was I just was remembering that we did talk a lot about the fact that sometimes if it wasn't attached to a policy, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, that it would be difficult to remember to update, like if we made a change to the policy, then we have to remember, oh, there might be something different in the best practices document. And so we needed to, that was another reason why we thought we would have some sort of a linkage so that it would remind us, so if we make an update here, we also have to make a corresponding update in the best practices document.
Like, we reference, lots of our policies end with references to law. That the law is not part of policy, we don't write law. We could just include it as a reference, no different than we reference a variety of statutes.
Well, we could also put it, and maybe this is already the way it is, so an embedded hyperlink in there. So this is our best practices that we use. So that way, when you look at the policy, you automatically see that in there. That way it's a reference note of some sort. So we'll call it underneath the policy reference note, and then there's a link to the best practices. Everybody's good with that? Okay, thank you. And I lost track. I think I did a first and a second. That was discussion, right? Correct. Okay. Any further questions or any more discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. And no one's opposed or abstaining. Okay, so now we're going to move on to item 6.04, approval of an agreement extension. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District hereby authorizes the superintendent to extend with Jeffrey Gordon for consulting services through June 30th, 2024, in the amount not to exceed the original agreement valued at $20,000. Is there a motion? Thank you, Daryl. Second from Rebecca, and discussion. So just for your reminder, we're not adding in additional funds to this. This is the same amount that we already approved, just a longer time to pay it or use it. All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye, and no one's opposed or abstaining. All right, then under board development, we talked a little bit about that earlier. Homework that we want to do. Oops. And I will get out like a more detailed retreat. And I know I have some homework that I need to do for the board as far as the evaluation. Sarah, go ahead.
So it keeps saying on here that the recommended action is to approve you attending this conference.
I will type that up because we did talk a lot about how we wanted to handle that moving forward. So I just want to make sure we write all that down so that we're following that, what we agreed to. Potential considerations for future meetings. Oops. Hopefully we'll get some updates on some of these, see if we want to have, if we need to have further discussion. Is this a touchscreen? It is, perfect. Got the fancy thing here. Okay.
On the future meetings, I want to align on that discussion we had before on the exemptions. So the deadline is March 1st, correct? So we have to align on what it is we would be voting on. The next time we're together is the January 8 meeting. Then there's a January 22 meeting, and then 2 in February. So it seems like January 8th, if we had an administrative recommendation on what we would be voting on, and we could discuss that on the 8th. And then the 22nd, which is the next meeting, could be the continuation or the new public hearing. And we can, in between those, get out to the public what it is we would be voting on.
Are you saying do that on the 22nd,
Do that on
the
the
hearing?
22nd.
Because on the 22nd, we have a short agenda so that we could have the retreat afterwards. So we have the 5 p.m. start for that working dinner. And then there are currently 2 items on the agenda. Now, we could get no one like we did this evening, or we could have a whole lot of people come, which would drastically change the agenda for that evening.
I would just assume based on tonight that we're not going to get a crowd of people, but
Just-
I'm just saying,
You
we
never know.
need to meet, to be aligned on what it is we'd be voting on before we have a next public hearing on it, so that the public hearing can relate to the actual proposal. So there's 4 dates to work with: January 8, January 22, Feb 12, Feb 16. So wherever in there, so then maybe the continued public hearing is Feb 12.
So what I'd like to do is just work with the administration to see when they have the recommendation, all the information, and then work backwards as we do for agenda planning to make sure that we have everything covered prior to a vote date, prior to March 1st, when we would have to have had voted. Okay? All right,
So
thank you.
I just have a question, I guess, maybe to administration with respect to that recommendation. We've talked a lot about the theoretical impact of the exemptions. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't think we talked a lot about the budget for next year and how, I mean, I know we're not quite there yet with the state's budget, but just that intersection of tax impact, because the burden would be shifted to the rest of the taxpayers in addition to whatever else we need to build into our budget for next year. So to me, it's hard to have the conversation in a vacuum or in a silo without a deeper understanding of that burden shift and how the deeper impact on our non-exempt taxpayers.
Agreed, and as you all know, this is the same dilemma we had last year, is we've got to make a decision, as I see the nodding, by March 1st, and that the budget is not adopted until April. So it's the same position we're in now, but as we heard from legal counsel, we can change it from year to year. So if we come back with an administrative recommendation of the bare minimum, at least that gives us something from which to make our current decision, but also to gauge any future decisions about.
If we were to agree tonight that those are the 3 that we would be voting on, then we can be done with that part of it tonight.
Correct, but as you also too articulated, I mean, we've been torn between, do we adopt all 3? Do we pick one? Are we showing favoritism? But as I think you said, Mr. Seidberg, I mean, we could take all 3 and somebody may end up paying even more, thinking that they're getting a reduction just because of the disproportionality between the exemptions.
I had a chance just to visit with Catherine a little bit. So just to kind of bring this back up from the data aspect of it. When you're requesting data to be able to meet whatever those assumptions are, basically you're defining the assumptions ahead of time to then extrapolate out what that's going to mean. So for instance, with senior citizen, if you're going at that $50,000 level, then the corresponding data based on that is provided. And again, that's one of those, it's a projected because he's not going to be sure what folks are actually going to have that $50,000 level. That's one aspect of it. From the veterans aspect, there's level K, level N. They can mean certain things from a dollar threshold. What was provided to us, I believe, is what was used by the actual county itself was to provide, and that's the data they gave. So we can certainly look at different options, but the data that got, provided to us and then we sorted it was we kind of gave the parameters of here's the data we would like from a parameter perspective, and then give us what those dollar values are. But as I talked to Catherine on the way out, basically she can provide and help and guide and kind of give any of that information. That's going to be a bit of the challenge where we are going to need to know a bit on the front end of what do you want to turn around and ask the county to turn around and give us that search of that data to then provide it. So I can certainly take the data we've already got and give you the context behind it, which in our case, the county, what we've used in there for the corresponding senior citizens is the best extrapolation. It's at the highest level at 50,000. The county, we've mimicked theirs from the actual, that portion for the veterans. And for the firefighters, that's the context of people. It's just whether we went with the 2 or 5 years. So I don't think it's going to change a ton. There's certainly some, like I said, some variables that we could look at to potentially, but as far as the overall context of kind of putting one over the other or that kind of thing, Catherine will give you some examples because she's worked with other districts. You can certainly talk about it from a budgetary standpoint. Many of you already know kind of where we were at based on some of the discussions that we've left off from last year, where we probably didn't want to be any higher than what we went out with last year, considering where we got to from a percentage vote passing. And as Dan and Daryl and some of the other folks know from the facility side, we've got the $52 million project going. We've had some interest in everything from pools to other activities around here. So I don't anticipate any future or subsequent aid this year that is going to offset that. From a contract perspective, we're going to see some of those interests that got solidified last year during negotiations come through. And my plan was basically to provide, a budget would be with no cuts, using same resources, and then putting forward everything that came through contractually, as well as kind of going through the service requests that we've started today. So it'll probably come down to that crux of decision of how do you want to apply one versus the other two, or all three, I should say.
So I guess my proposal would be, we've gone through the analysis based on the assumptions that Brad has already made. My proposal would be that we put out that this is what we would be voting on whether that's January 22 or February 12, but have the further public hearing on January 8th on that specific proposal that relates to the projections that Brad has already run all the projections on based on data we've requested and gotten. That's, that we know what we're voting on. We can tell the community exactly what it is we would be voting on. If they choose to come on the 8th and provide us with additional feedback on that, then that would be great. And then on either January 22 or February 12, vote on that. That's what I would propose.
And some may come and say, not enough, too much, yay, nay. I mean, we could get a variety of, yep.
Okay, we'll work to get the information for the board so that we can accomplish that.
Marissa,
right.
just a quick side note, under the meeting dates, I think
Future-
February 12th.
Which
yeah,
one?
um,
Are you on future meeting agendas?
Yep, future
Okay.
meeting agendas.
Yep.
February 12th, I think the next date is supposed to be February 26th, not February 16th.
That's correct.
Thank you for catching that. We'll fix that.
Yep. Well, it just gives us one more date closer to the deadline, that's all.
Okay. If there's nothing further under dates to remember, I'll move to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Dan, and a second from Daryl. All those in favor, please indicate aye. And no one's opposed or abstaining. All right. So then we have a final executive session, excuse me. Is there a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining? Thank you, Daryl, and a second from Cindy. Any discussion? All those in favor indicate aye. Aye, no one's opposed or abstaining. So we're going to exec, and then we will adjourn from there with no further public business. Thank you.